Are we back on? Please say something in the chat. Hello, hello. Oh! Oh no! Oh my god, I've been talking for, yeah, 45 minutes straight. You know, I guess we start over then. Alright then, guys. I think I'm going to take a break now. Motivate again. And I'll be back in 5 minutes. We are going to start over. Jesus Christ. Okay. So here we go again. I guess it's going to be a bit more rehearsed right now. uh, I hope I will have enough strength to go through the whole material. Oh yeah. So this is I started like oh my god. Here we go again. So hello guys. My name's Adam. Uh, Also known as DKNS Design. Or at least I try to be known as that. Yeah, so this is my or like the submission for Nodevember context, specifically the InstaMAT one, because as I had mentioned last time, the the topics, the prompts that Nodevember had this year were all about fantasy. Like, Lord of the Rings, high fantasy kind of stuff, sorceresses, towers, and orc temples and all that. I'm not that into it. Especially, I also think it's a bit difficult to come up with a nice, difficult material for that. That's actually tells the story of some like magical tower or something like that. I just couldn't come up with anything, so I just ended up working on my own stuff. So last Sunday, I broke down the marble material. It's just very simple, but a lot of the lessons, if there were any lessons, a lot of the tools I had to use there will be used again now. So uh, that's it. So what did I make, huh? I made this little ice flow, thawing, melting uh, lake with damage, with skate marks, with like little bubbles inside, and like this cracking, interior cracking with some subsurface scattering. Now, I already spoke about this for 10 minutes, but in my opinion, like water materials or anything with something that's like half transparent is really difficult to make with textures because you have to fake depth, right? Like you have to fake a lot of depth. Uh, in my case, I tried to emulate this by doing these like slow blurs. I'll talk about this later. Um, Essentially, I tried to create like an idea that this is maybe a very deep lake uh, that has maybe like 5-10 centimeters of ice on top of it. That's sort of melting away, right? And my inspiration for that was a black and white image, or almost black and white image, I found on Unsplash, this one. And I really like that it has like so much going on, but at the same time you could really tell that this is just ice, right? This is like crushed ice in the middle. I really wanted to make that. I'll talk about it in a second. In the end, I ended up discarding the idea, but I wanted to do something like this, right? And my second inspiration was this beautiful shot of a actual not melting lake, and you can see a lot here. First of all, you have these skate marks. You see like where the ice accumulated. You can see like that it's sort of like frozen over. It creates these like deep trails. You can see like when you look at the specular, you can see that it is like actually cracked even at a larger scale, so you can almost see a Voronoi pattern there. You can see the beautiful color that you get from like you know essentially subsurface scattering of water and ice. And all of this is really difficult to fake with textures, right? Like it's not exactly the same as creating a full-blown shader in Unreal or a Blender, and so you have to um, let's say tell a story rather than actually really go for like physically based material. Even though this is a PBR material, of course, and even though realism was uh, my goal, I think I ended up halfway between stylized and realistic. Yeah. Also, I had some problems like getting rid of some of the obvious CGI-ness. For example, the big Voronoi pattern that you just see here. Uh, I'll talk about it in a second. Yeah. So please just let me know that you can actually hear me now. That I haven't been talking to myself, for the last 5 or 10 minutes again. Also, if you have any questions, any suggestions, if you disagree with something, please talk to me. It's much better if I can just like have someone talk to me than just talk to myself. So yeah, I should also tell you like the marble material I show. Oh yeah, excellent. We can. Perfect, perfect. Oh, Kiba, are you Kiba of Zebra, the InstaMAT person? Welcome, welcome. And Royal J, yes, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. Yes. So yeah, I want to tell you, like the marble material came about in about I don't know 5 hours, right? Like it's very simple with all the experimentation and all the coloring and all that. It was really like almost a speed art for me. I'm not very fast with node-based workflows like this yet. And on the other hand, this material took me. I worked on it on and off for like 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks. Um, you know, I think I must have sent some like snapshots of this of work in progress to Dan Betke maybe you know 7 times or 8 times, and yeah, always got really good feedback, of course. Um, Now, what I'm trying to say is that this material is not polished at all. First of all, the graph is quite long, it's messy, it's not optimized. I overused a lot of noise. The way I approached it is not to create, wasn't to create a material that someone else could use right away, but I was going for a specific image that I had from my references and in my head, and I just wanted to sort of test how far I could get with it. This is really my first like complex material that I had finished ever. In InstaMAT, in substance design, I have experience in both, but I have never really been like able to complete a project like this. So that was a challenge. I will always try to tell you where I think I could have simplified. If you have any suggestions, I would be welcome to. I would be happy to hear them. Anyhow, yeah, and also like I think I fell ill halfway through. I was quite feverish, so especially the color uh, aspect of the graph is just a huge mess and totally not advisable to do it this way. So again, it's really difficult to control. Last stream I talked about how I think it's very important to maintain control of you know of your blending, of your like the predictability of results you get from such a graph. And I just this is not a graph to do it, right? Like this is sort of like do as I say, not as I do stream. So yeah, I also don't claim to be like a professional or anything, right? Like I'm sure there are much better ways of doing a lot of the stuff I had done or I've done. All right. So anyway, last time we were working on sort of veins in the marble. We started with the Voronoi pattern, specifically the Krex Organic. It's an amazing node that combines like sort of post-processed Voronoi texture to create something like roots. We then deformed it quite a bit to get like sharp marbling, essentially, your veins in the stone. This is pretty much the same process that I'm going to employ to create these basic shapes. So I start with the Voronoi pattern again, right? This time just this very big shape. The challenge isn't really like creating nice looking shapes. The challenge is to break up the obvious CGI aspect of it, right? Like you get Voronoi patterns and everyone can recognize it. And anyone and everyone, really. Like people who are not even into CG will look at it and they say like, oh my god, this is digital, right? Because it's mathematical, because it's everywhere. So the challenge here would be to break this up, and I think I did not succeed. Like if I tile it, you see like you can still see it. Like obviously the idea was to have it like you would be really like down the ground, like at the level of the ice, so you don't really see it that much. But yeah, I guess the solution to this would be to blend or like vertex blend materials in Unreal, for example. Let's say one with these like large watery cracks, and one without, right? I don't know how that would look or what that would look like exactly, but yeah, just sort of a disclaimer that the tiling is still kind of obvious. Another thing I should mention, if we look at the reference, originally I wanted to do this sort of crushed ice effect, and I ended up going with sort of a half frozen water lake surface, right? Um, why? Well, first of all, I couldn't achieve any good texture that wouldn't look too noisy or cementy or like concretey. I don't know if these adjectives even exist, but I guess you know what I mean. Like it's a very specific pattern of noise, since like of course the surface of an ice is obviously uh, water, right? But it's frozen water, so it's both solid and fluid. And crushed ice is like the sharpest and the like the noisiest part of it, and it's really difficult to achieve. At least I find it really difficult to achieve this sort of like effect in with the tools we have here. Again, that's probably speaking to my inexperience, but I ended up like just tossing that idea, and I'll talk about it a bit later too, because that's one of the things that like a a good optimized material wouldn't have. I did some stupid height blending that's really difficult to undo and it's really difficult to control, but that was because I had originally wanted to sort of fill these crevices with crushed ice. All right, now, so Voronoi, Voronoi. Then slow blurring, basically what I want to be doing here is just distorting this perfectly straight shape. And that's all this is doing. I'm using a lot of different noises. Crystals are perfect for like sharp directional blurs, directional warps and directional blurs as well. Then, so if we look at this, I sort of non-uniform blurred it, made it a bit like wider. Then I clamped it again, but it gave me a bit more of a shape to work with. Then I did first warping, second warping. This one was quite intense. You can see that it creates almost like a, I don't know, like a smoky pattern. And then I created one that with high definition, high frequency, and it's this lovely stone noise. First of all, I noticed that it tends to create spirals. I don't know if that's useful at all to anyone, but it's funny to me. Might be useful for something, not sure what. But it has, it's amazing for. Oh yeah, thanks, thanks Zebra or Akiba. I'm, I'm actually used to public speaking. I'm a teacher, so and actually an English teacher, believe it or not. So um, yeah, any mistakes and all that, that's all on my head. If you have any questions, something that's not clear, just ask. I'll go back and explain if I know, of course. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the stone noise. Yes, it is very high frequency, but it has these like ridges and all that. Obviously, stone noise is great for like detailing rocks or bricks or even something like I don't know, bark, tree bark, right? But here I just use it to create like a very high frequency warp. And I'm just going to get rid of it for the most part, but it's going to give me these like very sharp edges, right? And that's what we want. We want to create an impression of a solid surface that may be a bit like broken, right? Like broken with impacts, for example, like breaking apart as if when you break a cookie, right? Like think about that. And that's what we'll have. I just add some more Berlin noise. Like the order of things is could be inversed, right? Like in general, I would probably start with like the larger, softer, flowy noise, and then use the stone noise. In retrospect, that would have been better. But like I said, I was just like going forward, right? Like it was sort of a spear art challenge, even though it took more than a week. It was a speed art. So like the mentality I have going in from doing sort of daily renders in Blender, for example, is just like let's just make it work and move on, right? You can always go back and polish it or just remake it, and you will be 10 times faster, right? So there will be a lot of stupid things, things that don't make sense, things that are um, unnecessary, but that's just how it is. Anyhow, I tried this clouds ridged noise. I used it to slow blur. Yeah, you can see that it introduces like these little like mangled shapes. Again, probably better to do it beforehand, before the like high frequency stone noise. Uh, don't care, right? And then I used grayscale to mask. If you've ever used Substance Designer, this is the histogram scan node. What it does, it looks at the image, it sort of takes a threshold on the black and white scale or like the grayscale, and makes a cutoff, right? And so you get a solid binary mask out of it. which was perfect for this, right? Like I didn't want all the detail yet. I didn't want all the sloping, all the blurry parts. That wouldn't look good, right? I'm not going for weird stones, right? On I don't know. I'm not going for like mountain stones, mountain tiles, broken tiles of stuff, something like that. I was going for ice. So this is the basic shape. Again, I used another. This is the first thing that doesn't really make sense, right? Like I added a directional warp that doesn't really do anything. Could We could get rid of it in optimization phase, right? Uh, okay, so that's the basics. Now, I also wanted to have these skate marks, and I knew that going in. This was the plan, right? So, mm, if you remember, this is how I started with like the larger veins in the marble. It's exactly the same process, or almost exactly the same process. I take a line, or basically a box that's really thin. I warp it, and then I use this time two random scatters and blend them together, which creates these. Now, I would like to talk about tiling, right? Uh, for let's imagine how the material would be used, right? Like, let's say you take the material and you apply it to a whole lake in Unreal Engine. And the problem is we are creating tiling textures. So when you do something like this, when you want to create a continuous line that goes across the whole image, it will start, and we are trying to create tiling textures, it will sort of start appearing on the other side. You can see this one, right? Like it's the same line, the same shape. This one continues here. The issue is that when we start tiling, we get, instead of like one super continuous long line, we get a lot of them. It looks like scratches instead of skate marks. Now, again, it might be better to do some sort of blending. Let's say you create your large, I don't know, displacement mat with just these like marks, and then you throw it over your material in Unreal. But then you have to think about how you handle the details that come from that mat, right? Again, for me, this was more about creating the specific look and not just like a fully usable material. But that's just something to think about. Of course, there are limitations to our technology. Anyway, I keep bending it and transforming it. And here I have a very important transform where I sort of manually place these, right? It's, again, like I said, it's difficult to control, so I took this transform and just placed them somewhere. In retrospect, I would say it had, yeah, no, it's set to save transform. So there is a save transform template for transform node. Basically what it does, it transforms the texture in a way that it preserves the tiling, right? So you don't have to use this for everything, but let's say you want the texture to be, moving forward to be tileable. You should probably use safe transforms. Of course, some small noise that doesn't really show as much in like the large scale shapes, that won't really matter if you just transform it instead of safe transform it. Yeah. The limitation of safe transform is that you really can't scale up, right? You can only scale down, basically meaning that you will get more tiling textures, and you can sort of like rotate at specific angles only. I think there are some increments that you can use. Okay, that's a bit of a detour, sidetracked. All right, so yeah, creating these large scratches, transforming them, slow blurring them to create a bit of like, again, it's not much, right? Like okay, it actually doesn't really do much at all. Again, something that might have been better to just omit. Then this time the effect is quite pronounced. I used the directional warp with the crystals, and it creates a bit of a sort of like older skate mark, right? Like fresh skate marks would be almost perfectly straight, but this is melting, thawing ice, so you want a bit of imperfection, right? Like it's aged. And then I take this flow noise, which is basically a version of Berlin noise, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know like what the difference is. It has a bit more directionality, I guess. I like it for, again, like very let's say, bendy, very bendy deformations for the direction of warp. What what it does, it creates like a bit of shape here. Again, we could do without it. We could do without it, but I wanted to test it. Yeah, this was basically me learning all the noises we have in InstaMAT. All right, so this is like the basis for the cracks. And here I just blend them together, and we will use that for our flood fills later on. But first I want to talk about these shapes right here in the sort of, I'm going to call them rivers. These are just like a bit of storytelling, right? I wanted some sort of like fragments of the ice, uh, like suggesting that there is a bit of a flow through the water and that it's like melting away, right? Like it's thawing ice after all. So to do that, I was very quick about it. Took me like 5 minutes. I just slow blurred this shape with itself. I made it smaller, uh, and I created a lot of different Voronoi patterns, and I subtracted them from each other so that I get just a few of them here, right? And then when I came back to it after a few days, I realized that I wanted more. So like more smaller ones. So I created even this like high frequency Voronoi cracks, and again subtracted this large one from it, so you can see the result. And then I'm blending it here together. And what it does, it ends up doing this, right? All right, bye bye, zebra. Bye bye. Have a good one. I would have been better if recorded the first hour. Anyhow, moving on for the posterity, I suppose, and for Royal J. Yeah, I created these like interior, sorry, little shapes in the river, and created a mask out of it. And yeah, that's it. I added the cracks, and that's it. Basically, this is the last step before the fluff fills. I also did a bit more of directional blur here. It's really subtle. Like if you look here, it's like very binary, very straight. I wanted a bit more difference, so it's a bit like wobbly. Yeah. Subtle, obsessive detail. I don't think any professional would like spend too much time on this. I just thought I'd do it. Why not? I knew I was going to use clouds heavy, so essentially that's just a little bit of deformation. Like it's not even heavy on like processing power, just a fraction of a millisecond. All right, I'm gonna drink now a little bit. If there are any questions, how many viewers do we have, huh? 2. Okay. All right, so I think I managed to sort of sum up what I had said before in 30 minutes instead of 40 minutes. So now, moving on, the flood fills. Now, this is a technique you will see in many tutorials, I think. Essentially, you take whatever black and white shapes you have. It can be grayscale, but there has to be quite a bit of difference between the values so that the flood fill node can isolate your islands. In this case, I had to use this complex shapes algorithm, because we have complex shapes, right? We have quite a bit of jagged edges, quite a few jagged edges. We have scratches there that I actually ended up not using for the flood fill in the end, but originally I used them. So it had some issues detecting the islands. And of course you can control it with the threshold. The threshold, essentially, it works a little bit like the grayscale to mask. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on inside. Again, it cuts off at a certain threshold in the black and white histogram, and it gives you the UV sort of shells, UV shapes for each island. Yeah. Right. And then we use this flood filter gradient. Now, what does flood filter gradient do? It's very simple. It creates a gradient for each of those styles that we created in flood fill, and you can then play with it a little bit. So you can change the randomness of it, right? Like let's create a new one. This time flood fill to gradient. And we are going to talk about the end-pass version in a bit. So this is what it looks like when you just first bring it in. We have a uniform gradient for each tile. It goes from left to right, but we can increase the variance here. Basically, it now is completely random. As to the direction, we can randomize the position for each tile as well, or each island, if you will. And that's what we want. Now, what are we actually creating? Well, we are creating subtle height differences for each and every single flow, right? Every single piece of ice here. Now, I ended up making it very subtle because if you think about it, like ice is still water and it tends to level, right? Like it tends to level out, it tends to create a smooth surface unless something is sort of pushing it one way or another. When you look, of course, when you look at I don't know, at a large piece of ice on the sea, there are a lot of forces in action, but we are talking about sort of like calm waters, maybe a bit of a river, right? Perhaps there isn't much that would push the ice up and down. So maybe we have like different accumulations, and you can sort of see it. Most importantly, I think it's going to create some nice specular reflections. So that's why I wanted to do this. Now, the technique used here is that you create a multiple flood fill to gradients, and you blend them together using either multiply or maybe minimum. And because they are all randomized, you will get different directions that will be blended together. Now, the devs were so nice as to create the NPass version of this, which sort of does this for you. So NPass, where is that? The gradient NPass, right? You can see what it does. It creates these steps for you. You get a little less control, but also a few different ones than this technology that I employed here. You get different blending modes here. You can get different gradients, just like in the non-NPass, non-iterative version. Now, if you don't know, NPass is essentially your repeat loop from Blender. It's a for loop for those who code. It basically takes some operation and repeats it on the input a couple of times, saving you the time. I'll talk about my custom NPass node a little bit later. So this is excellent for creating, let's say, stones or, again, bricks, stuff like that. It will create different slopings, different slopes for your shapes. Anyhow, that's what I did. Blended it together, play with it a little bit, distorted it a little bit, blurred it, leveled it. Again, I think this whole part could be dropped. Yeah. And then I blended back into my main height sort of bus that goes through the whole graph. Yeah. Right. Now, as I said, like I created these rivers and these little shapes, and I started doing a bit of storytelling. First of all, I am using my own NPass. I call it Ringify. Essentially, what it does, it takes it's an edge detect that repeats itself on a shape that shrinks over time, right? Like I take a binary mask, black and white. I isolate a part of it, and I sort of use the distance node that we talked about last time, the dilation node, and I scale it in a couple of times. And every time I use an edge detect, so it creates rings. It creates rings from smaller and smaller shapes. Now, I use this for different purposes, but mostly for hard surface action, like your vents or your panels or something, where you don't want to do this manually 100 times, right? So you can create a little bit of tool for yourself to help you out. Anyway, I thought, why not test it? Why not test it on something as complex as this? Because so far I had been using it on stuff like squares or circles, but I wanted to do something more. So I took that, I blurred it, I distorted it with warp, then I inverted it, and I think I'm multiplying it over this. And what it does, if we can find some detail here, for example, right? So it sort of eats away at the ice. It creates a bit of an edge wear, if you will. Now, why am I saying it's a part of a storytelling of the material? Well, essentially, it's like these parts like fell off the ice, right? Like they came off, they melted away. Finally, they are loose now in the water, flowing away. That's how I thought about it. I thought, let's do that. Also, I created this part which I ended up not using, but what it does, if I unmute it, it controls the height of these little fragments in the water. If I increase the multiply, you can see that it goes down. I'm just darkening it so it goes slower. I ended up not using it. I ended up liking these shapes, but if I were to sort of ship it to someone, I would probably clean the graph and expose the parameter to someone to the user that would use this material in his workflow, and of course he could decide for himself whether he wants to keep them or not. Alright, so that's that. Now, I ended up adding a bit more of scratching, like big scratches, that don't really translate into like the overall sort of gradients of the ice. Uh, it's subtle. It's the same again, the same technique. This time I'm just using the InstaMAT tool, the Scratches 3. You get a lot of settings here that you can use. Since I'm not really concerned with placement here, this is perfect. I warp it, I distort it again, and we get like these shapes. And then I just subtract them from my height very subtly here. Yeah. If you change the seed on this, it will not like completely change your material, which is good, right? Like you want it to be predictable. So I think it's this, for example, right? Like it's a little bit like an older skate mark, if you will. All right, so scratches. Now, this next part is a bit controversial. It's where it sort of veers off in the direction of stylization instead of like realism. What it does, if I zoom in, it's this, right? Like I raise the edges along the skate marks. Uh, it seems subtle, maybe, but it also creates a lot of contrast. It like pulls attention, and uh, and also your like your roughness channel, your albedo channel, and your normal channels will pick up on this, right? Your AO, your curvature will pick up on this. So it's a lot of like free detail if you like add this sort of outline to your scratches. And also when you think about it, like when you have melting ice, or when you skate through the ice, on the ice, sorry, when you skate on the ice, and it's not completely frozen. It's like maybe like around 0 degrees, right? And the surface is a little bit like melting away. It will leave a trail, and it will push the material to the sides as you're skating. So I thought maybe it's not completely insane to do that. So what I'm doing, I'm creating a lot of variation from our scratches. First I'm creating the mask. I'm blending the scratches together from before, and then I'm like slow blurring it so that it's not exactly the same as the scratches before. I'm blurring it to get like subtler shapes, more subtle shapes. Um, yes, 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 yes. And then I'm doing something weird. but I think it worked out, and that's like the strongest part of the effect. I'm doing an edge detect on the result we got from this part, and you can see that it does this, right? Edge detect, this time I'm using the algorithm Kenne. There are three different algorithms for edge detect in InstaMAT. Kenne is what you would get from a Substance Designer, I think. InstaMAT by default uses Sobel, which is a bit smoother, but also gives you thicker lines. In this case, I didn't mind the jagged detail, the per pixel detail. I blurred it, I warped it, and then I toned it down with the noise. And if you look at it here, and I turn it off, you can see that this outline disappears. If you look at the image here in a viewport, I don't know if I can find a good here, right? So if I do this, like that's the strongest part of the effect. It's almost like a strict outline, really, right? It's I don't know. I'm not too sure about this, but I thought it was a good idea at the time. I'm also sharpening it. I would advise against this. Sharpening your height is always dangerous because it creates artifacts, right? And I'm also sharpening it by a lot, by almost like 40%. I did that knowing that I'm going to be blurring my height output. You should almost always do that. In fact, InstaMAT has this material finalize node that by default has this setting set to 5%. Basically, there is an internal blur, blurring the height by 5%, which is a lot. But it's like you need less when you work at 2K. If you work at 4K, I would definitely recommend using a higher height blur, because even though you get like a lot more resolution, you will also get a lot more artifacting that way, like in fine details. So blurring the height is actually smart. When you work on something like hard surface again, I wouldn't go as high as 5%, maybe 2%, 2.5%, because you want those like sharp transitions there, right? But here, blurring the transitions between the water and the ice, for example, and this like very sharp edge rays is a good thing. All right, I'm gonna take another break. So, do we still have any viewers? Any information you would like me to share? All right, whatever. uh, I'm doing this for myself, okay? To I don't know why, but I'm doing this for myself. All right then. So yes, I think this part could be like you could do without it. For example, if I oh hey yeah Royal J, you're my loyal follower, right? Hopefully it's useful to you. You know, like me just talking randomly. Oh, Dragon Sleeve, hey, welcome. I've also seen you a lot, right? Like we talked about something today on Discord, haven't we? Oh yeah, you made that atom graph. Good job. I haven't really been able to make an atom yet. I actually don't know what I would use it for. You know, I'm not that like low level guy. Anyhow, yes, I was just going to show you how much of an effect it has, right? Like if I use this like outline, it really like pulls out these skate marks. If I were to get rid of them, it's maybe a bit more realistic, but a bit more boring. And since a lot of the albedo is going to be based on our AO and curvature, it's actually good that we have some information there, right? So that you can have like this idea of like sediments or snow like settling in those little crevices. So yeah, that's how I justify this in my little head. Okay. I don't know what's happening here. apparently there is nothing important happening here. It's just a small, it's just a small directional warp here, and yeah, it's just additional detail, really, right? Like you can see that it sort of adds these like edges here. Again, maybe don't do that, right? I was just like pushing buttons, you know, like a trained monkey, but except I'm not very trained, so I was just doing random stuff. Okay, now, in fact, this is like the big shapes mask. I should have probably taken it here, right? It's this mask, essentially. Um, I took it here because I did some warping there. Uh, really, this is a bit stupid. It should be taken here. But we will definitely use this later, right? So we needed that. The way I did it, I just again took histogram select and basically selected all the blacks here. So I have it set to position 0, and I'm just giving it a bit of a space to detect the values I want. In this case, like 25%, 27% of the histogram gets selected. I then do a weird thing. Why did I do that? I'm not exactly sure why I'm doing even more. I don't know. I still histograms scanned it or like grayscale to mask it. Why? No idea. Um, Again, yeah, do as I say, not as I do. That's the lesson. All right. Now, this whole part is are these cracks, like the internal cracks, essentially. If you look at the library, into the library, into InstaMAT's library, you will find a very nice material um, called, I think, Frozen Lake or Icy Frozen Lake or something like that. It's really nice. Essentially, what I did, I was really inspired by it. I took a lot of the elements there and sort of interpreted them my way. I really like the effect of these like internal cracks that are like submerged in the ice, but there's already some some maybe air going in, and so you can see that it's like going to fall apart eventually. Maybe it was like there was some sort of impact. Again, it's strange that like the whole lake would be hit by an impact. Maybe I could have masked it out per ice flow, but whatever. Again, going into the more of a stylized uh, aspect of the material. So yeah, this is also the first time I tried to sort of introduce like albedo depth into the material. Not an actual height difference or a normal information, but just layering different opacities and different slow blurs so that it creates this like yeah, basically like it looks as if there was some depth. It doesn't work from like top down because then you can see that it's just like going to the sides. But if you look at it at an angle of let's say like 25, 30 degrees, you can like think about it as if it's going down, as if there was some sort of parallax going on, some sort of perspective shift. Uh, yeah, I don't know if it's good, but I wanted to try it, so that's what I did. And the setup here is a bit crazy. So first, I'm creating different noises, custom noises. Uh, I really think that like if you have the time, you shouldn't just use the noise you get from any software, just as it is. Like introduce a little bit of difference, right? I don't know, like let's use like 50% default blending between Cloud Smooth and Clouds Rough, or Clouds 1 and Clouds 3 in Designer, or something like that. It's really not that difficult, right? Or warp it, or slow blur it with itself, or something like that. It will give your material a more unique feeling. All right. And yes, if you remember, we already did that with the marble and of course the previous cracks or the rivers here. I just take cracks and iterate and distort them. I'm using Berlin noise, stone noise, fractal sum, clouds, liquid noise is a nice one. We will use that again a couple of times. I actually tried creating this. Where is it? Yeah, I created a custom shape for my noise, but I guess I'll get to it later. You can create a lot of different noises, a lot of different warps that way. So yeah, uh, I don't really know if it's necessary for me to go through the whole like step-by-step deformation. You can see what I'm doing, right? Like I'm just doing different deforms. What is this doing here? What is this doing here? Oh shoot. Slow blurs, directional warps, non-uniform blurs, and then I'm just like blending it all together, right? This is the result we get after the first sort of pass of deformations. I think this part, yes, I called it a warping sprite. You can create like this large directional, almost crystals noise, uh, and yeah, bringing in some of the noises we had before. I'm using crystals 2 again, blending it all together, creating something that's like that hasn't been used anywhere else, right? And I use that to drive some of my deforms. I really don't know what these are and why they are not moving with the rest of the graph. It's a bit annoying. Um, that's fine. Oh, so coming from Blender, I'm playing a lot with the fractal sum, which is similar to the Blender noise. And I'm playing also with the vector warp, which is the one used in Blender. Yes, yes, definitely. I think I'm not sure, but I think we in Blender, if you use the noise texture, it's like I think it's a couple of different noises put together. I'm not exactly sure what the algorithm is. Uh, if you remember, in the previous version, I think they removed the FBX. No, not the FBX. FBX. You know, there was a special the Musgrave, right? The the Musgrave texture, which is basically just a version of noise, right? Basic noise. Your I don't know, your like white noise, essentially. So yes, yeah, I think I think Blender there is an add-on in Blender now. I think it's for 3, which adds additional noises uh, into Blender. I haven't tried it out yet because I've been really like focused on InstaMAT for this part of the creative process. But you know, back then when I was learning Blender like a few years ago, I definitely you know had a lot of fun with just the noise texture and the Musgrave and the water noise and all that that they have. Um, yeah, FBM, not FBX. Yes, you're right. FBM normalize. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Dragon Sleeve. Got something like that in my custom library. Oh, you mean my my little warping sprite? Yeah. Like, you know, creating custom grunges is. I think I could easily see it becoming a hobby of mine, you know? Oh yeah, you tried the add-on, yeah? Okay, cool. What kind of noises do they have? Because like, you know, Instamat has unfortunately Instamat's add-on for Blender is really not functional or functioning, I should say. Hopefully that's going to change. And yeah, what was I going to say? Yeah, yeah. So like I can't wait to use the noises we get in Instamat to play with in Blender. But if there are other options, right? Like that would be nice. All right, I'm just gonna drink again, losing my voice. Yeah, using that for glyphs. I think that's where I got the idea. I think I watched Dan Betke's from Instamat as well. Um, Tutorial he has like an old Substance Designer tutorial, and that's how he created I think some glyphs or something like that. Yeah, and I thought you know like why limit ourselves? We can use this stuff for anything, really. Hmm. All right, I'm not going to walk you through all the individual nodes here because I don't really remember what they do. I just like again pushed a lot of buttons and hoped for the best, and in the end I got some result, right? They have 13 right now. They are pretty great. Anyway, not something which would bring me back to Blender from InstaMAT. Yeah, I see. I see. Okay. I have to say, like, I actually I'm a modeler, and I haven't really touched modeling in a while. I've been playing with InstaMat a lot. I and like the other day I had to go back and try to like model some basic stuff, and it was really rough, I have to say. Like it's such a different workflow, like instead of pushing vertices and managing your geometry and all that, you here it's much more, let's say, on the creative intuitive side here. You just like have to like coax the shapes out of your noises and yeah. I guess I would be interested in becoming a material artist now. Yes. Uh, Back to our material here. Um, so if you remember in the marble material, I created a lot. I used a lot of the um, iterate node here. What iterate does, it takes the input image and basically tiles it with like higher frequency multiple times over itself. So it's like free detail. Also, you can use this like custom built-in function that's called dissolve. Basically, what it's going to do, it's going to multiply a Berlin noise over your texture. Um, Roger, here you can see some. Sorry, where can I see what? If you are sending any links or anything, I don't think it's going to show. At least not for me here in OBS. So maybe you could post them in Discord or like text me later or something because I don't really see anything but your text. I think I don't have like links allowed in chat. Anyhow, or if you are talking about the noises, that we can see them in InstaMat. You mean? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. Sure. Okay, sorry. Let's get back to the material. So yes, I'm using iteration to create like free details. This won't be that visible in the end, but it's there. If you really zoom in, I ended up like you can sort of see it here, like it's there. Again, you wouldn't really see that at an angle, but I guess the more you add, the more realistic it's going to look. At the same time, I think this is just noise, and maybe in hindsight, I wouldn't do that, or maybe I would even like lower the opacity some more. Uh, okay, now this is what I called glow. Essentially, to create the idea of depth, you have to play with the opacity. To play with the opacity, you need to create an effect similar to glow. For example, sometimes people talk about rust glow, which is like the blending of the rust leaking over your paint. Um, okay, thank you. I'll check it out. All right. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, yeah, I saw that. That's exactly the add-on I was talking about. Yeah. All right, thank you. Sure. Yeah, for I guess anyone or someone who would. Uh, I'm gonna try to post it in chat. This is the add-on we have been discussing. All right. Now, yes. So the glow effect. Now this is achieved by using a really intense slow blur. I don't know if I explained it last time. What a slow blur is, it's essentially a series of directional warps, or directional blurs, if you will. So you will get this stepping. So you have to manage that with blurs and all that to get like a smoother transition. Uh, in any case, actually, like a little bit of these artifacts can be used to create all sorts of layering effects. For example, bark or tree bark. Yeah, that has a bit of layering. You can use slow blurs with like settings that will create artifacts. It will become a bit of a like a quantize effect, right? But that's another topic. So yeah, this is where we at after adding the glow, and yeah. Now, oops, I didn't want to copy the whole thing. Uh, yeah, I wanted to talk about this last time as well. Essentially, when you take noise, let's say your high frequency fractal sum or clouds or something like that, and you want to lower the frequency, you have a couple of options. One of them is to slow blur it with itself and at the high settings, and it will create more of a like balloony look. Yeah. So this is what I'm using here again to create a bit of a custom noise, blending it over to break up the uniformity. It also creates this like um, pattern that's sort of reminiscent of something like ice. Mhm. And when we blend it all together, it looks like this. So these like directional warps and blurs and slow blurs and all that created a bit of a fog around the uh, ice cracks, which is what we get here in the end. It's not a difficult effect, it's just a bit, you don't have to go as hard as I did, but it takes a bit of work to blend all these together to make them look convincing. Okay, now in the InstaMAT frozen lake material, these cells are really offset in height quite a bit. Now, at first I didn't use that at all, but then I decided why not, right? Like it's already quite noisy. I don't want it to be completely flat, and so like what it does, I just use a very subtle version of this. It creates a little bit of a specular reflection. Maybe this is not the best HDRI to demonstrate this, but there is a little bit of a displacement there. Um, again, like I don't see a reason there would be, in fact, because that's not how ice works. But why not, right? Interesting stylized effect. So that's what this does. This time I'm using the flat filter gradient again. Sorry, the flat filter gradient again. But just from one of those like cracks I made recently. I have made recently. Yeah, and I'm blending it into our main height bus essentially. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I'll also play with this later in for some masking for the color with vector blurs. Shape effect has some glow effects. Shape effect. Shape effect. I haven't used that node yet. What does it do? Adds an effect to a specified input image that is blended together with a specified background. Okay, interesting. So let's plug in something, I don't know. Let's plug in Berlin. Maybe we can do grayscale to mask, maybe. And softness. Maybe blur it a little bit. Okay. So what's gonna happen? Outer glow, inner glow. I see. Okay, that's interesting. Glow filter. Okay. I guess the challenge here would be to break that up, right? Like you get the breakup sort of for 3 using directional warps and slow blurs, but here you could like get a more uniform glow and then maybe subtract some noise from it and all that. Yeah, I can definitely see myself using that. Okay, thanks for the tip, Dragon Sleeve. Mhm. Right. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, yeah, we finished the tracks, right? With the glow and everything. I think I also used another iterate node and just like blended it in to create even more detail. Again, I think that's like pushing it. Should have probably like not added any more noise because I was going to add the next detail, which are these bubbles, frozen bubbles in ice. Again, my reference definitely has that, and it was one of the like more pronounced effect. And it's also one of those that is almost impossible to fake, I think, because these bubbles they would need special normals, right? Probably inverted normals. Inside the volume, they would need, you know, like shifts in hue based on their depth, actual depth, physical depth, and all that. So in the end, I ended up making like a lot of like dots on the surface. I'm not too happy about that. Like I don't know how I would go about it. I think you would need a shader. You would need a proper shader, not just a texture. But hey, this was a challenge, so I challenged myself to create bubbles. Now, bubbles are actually quite easy to make. The issue is like getting the first shapes to look right, and then the other issue is to create the outlines here. Like this would be created by your renderer, right? Because this is basically a reflection on the surface of the bubble, or like it's not a surface, but you know what I mean. Like where the material changes into air from water or ice. So I had to get a bit creative, uh, which is what this is about, I guess, right? So let's talk about bubbles. So first of all, there is this node called moisture drops in InstaMAT, right? Which creates, surprisingly, drops for you. You could do this yourself. You could do, again, tile scatter or scatter random and just get like a blurred sphere maybe, uh, and just create a lot of bubbles and take them together. Now, what did I do to get the outlines? Again, there could be 100 different ways of doing this. You could, for example, use the difference mode, right? I think I spoke about it briefly last time. Difference is great for making outlines. If you blend to basically do essentially same grayscale values together, it's going to give you the sort of the leftover brightness. So that's the difference between the two, and you will get like very grayish looking outlines, but you can then auto levels that. Anyway, in this case, I decided to use a different technique that I haven't tried before, basically inflating and sort of deflating the bubbles. Uh, I think I spoke about it already. Essentially, when you slow blur two maps together uh, and use maximum, it will inflate the shapes, and when you use the minimum, it will deflate in. Actually, I have them both set to maximum. I don't remember why. Also, if you want to control this effect, you need to blur the height input in the slope blur. I guess we can try it here. Mm, yeah, it's going to like the more you blur it in this case, the smaller they will be. Yeah. So essentially, this one is like deflating. Um, I haven't set it up correctly here, but you will see that technique many times, I think, in many tutorials. I think the person who introduced me to it was the Daniel Theiger. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Tiger is he's German, unless I'm mistaken, and yeah, he has a lot of like paid tutorials on Gumroad, but they're excellent. I can recommend them, or maybe on ArtStation. I don't remember where I got them. They are like $10. It's very cheap. Anyway, so and what I do, I subtract the inflated one, sorry, the deflated one from the inflated ones. Then I iterate, which creates a lot of like, there is some overlap and all that, but it's not going to be visible. And especially we are going to create more, right? I iterate once more, these like full ones. I blend it together. And I start distorting it, right? First, I'm just using Berlin noise. Then what am I doing? Using auto levels to see what I'm doing. I'm warping that. I'm then doing this weird thing. That's the histogram select. So it sort of creates even more outlines. And I'm getting more noise here. Again, slow blurring of it itself, blurring it, creating bubbles, and then I'm using histogram select to create like larger bubbly shapes. I'm blending it together, so it creates this. Blurring it, now it's starting to look a bit more sane, etc., etc. That's more of the same, adding new shapes from the previous noise, blending it, and I'm already like adding a bit more like air pockets in the ice. This can happen obviously when ice gets ruptured. There can be ice trapped beneath it, and it will create like variations in your albedo, in your luminance at the very least. In fact, in a renderer, in a volumetric ice, you would get quite a bit of scattering there, right? Like a lot of subsurface scattering, a lot of roughness differential inside the volume. Right. Okay. Then I'm using. Oh shoot! I did it again. Do not double click Save Transform. It's a bad, bad habit. You need to double click the output. So what I'm doing here, I'm scaling the noise down a lot. Essentially this is like a handheld controller for my bubbles. The texture we created is really large. Like the bubble would be a size of like a few centimeters, right? Like 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters. We don't want that. We want them to be very small. So again, I'm adding even more details, even more iterates. It's at this point, it's almost like noise. It's almost noise, right? If I thought about it some more, I wouldn't have added the air pockets here. I would have added them at the end. That would make more sense. I would make them smaller, but I would have added them at the end of the bubbles material. Now, okay. Now, Royal J says, now I used to, now I use, oh yeah, sure, yes, okay, so yeah, that's in response to me clicking the stupid save transform. Royal J says that he only uses the transform node, and there is a you can switch it to the save transform functionality, right? You can also do that with control. When you hover above it, you hold control and scroll your middle mouse wheel. It will change the modes. The thing is, this is quite slow, right? Like in comparison, type save transform, plug it in. You see what I mean? Like it's just when you go back and try to like preview it, or and you instead of clicking on this like small socket and you double click it and you go into the template preview or template interface. I wish that was removed. I really hate that behavior. Mm. But yes, that's a workaround. But it's really a workaround, right? Like you have to do 5 more clicks to prevent it from going into another window, which is not a good behavior. Again, like I said, I'm going to write a feature request for that. Anyhow, yes, so the result is, before we start adding liquid noise, this. Very noisy, obviously very tiling, but we won't see that because it's going to be so small and so broken up and covered up by other elements of the image. Kind of like nice looking bubbles, if I say so myself, which I do. I think that's actually, like, this one is beautiful. Look, right? Like you can see almost the reflections, right? Not all of them are so beautiful. Some are really weird, but for a small detail like this, I was very happy with the result. Like I have to praise myself a little bit here. Uh, yeah, so the workflow here is just like get some sort of dots, inflate them and deflate them, blend them together, create an outline, and then style them a lot and iterate them a lot, and then maybe blend in some noise. Of course, don't forget to warp it and slow blur it and all that. I think at some point I'm using a difference mode. I don't remember if and where. Um, no, I guess I'm not. Maximum. Yeah, I'm not. Yes, it doesn't matter, right? Also, another tip for this: don't use add and screen blending modes for this when you're blending when you're blending them together, because maximum will create sort of that gradation in opacity that you want, right? That gradation in the brightness of your bubbles. So it feels a little bit, at least to my eye, it feels a bit more like they are above each other instead of like meshing together. Of course, bubbles can mesh together, but it's very difficult. And when they're frozen in ice, you don't. That's unlikely to happen, right? It has to be like a bubble of air trapped in the ice. Usually not very much able to move at all, and definitely not able to blend with another bubble. So again, that's me being obsessive about the real world processes, but you know, it's what I did. Okay, so those are the bubbles. All of these actually they don't really contribute anything to our height channel, right? Uh, Probably should have saved them for later. This is essentially an albedo map. Okay. Now, are there any more suggestions, questions, anything? I'm gonna take a sip again. I've been talking for 2 hours. For you guys, it's been only like an hour and a half or something, but oh my god. Okay, so I I don't know if I must have mentioned it already, but don't use so many new noises, right? Like I'm running out of performance at a 2K resolution, and I've already must have used like 20 different noises, and I'm going to use a lot more. That's not good practice, right? Reuse what you can, and don't create too performance heavy operations for small details and all that. Um, so Royal Chase says, since how do you mean how long I've been doing InstaMAT? I've been learning InstaMAT. I got into InstaMAT like shortly after they released, which was at the beginning of the year, I think. I started learning procedural no procedural texture creation with InstaMAT. Like I had been watching a lot of tutorials about Substance Designer. I wanted to get into it, and then InstaMAT came, and yeah, uh, I really I really you know fell for it. I tried. You can find some of my older streams, my first streams. That was about baking, and I wanted to bake and texture some models in the layering aspect of InstaMat. I have to say I'm not that happy with that part. I think it needs quite a bit of love actually. So I went back to Substance Painter for that. But I really love the procedural workflow and the fact that you can like create your own repeat zones and all that. And it's younger than Substance Designer, of course. It does a lot of things it does. uh, some of them it does better. Some of them are just better UI. Some of them are just like non-existent in Substance Designer, as far as I can tell. So I'm really hopeful. I'm really looking forward to the next patch. I hope we are. I don't really care much for the terrain creation toolkit they are promising, but because I think there is already amazing software for that. But I'm really looking forward to like general improvement of the software, and yeah, and also the thing that I find I guess the most agreeable about InstaMAT is the community, right? Like it's a small community, but the devs are very much involved, and anytime you um, ask a question, you get some sort of answer. There are people who are experienced, there are people who are new coming in, and for me, it's a very friendly environment to study, right? To study, to learn how to operate such a program, right? Like I'm not a professional 3D artist, or at least I didn't used to be. So uh, I come from a very different profession, and so it can be a bit intimidating. And InstaMAT is really nice in that. So Dragon Sleeve says, I've been trying to create terrain. I've already been trying to create terrain in Math, so I'm their target audience. So okay, that's good. That's great. I started with like this sort of workflow in Gaia. You know, it's a procedural terrain toolkit. I made some textures there, some terrains, but I don't really have any use for that, right? Like I'm not working on an environment or anything like that. Rolo J says, InstaMAT is like a mix of industry standard and Blender community. Yes, yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly my impression. Yeah, yeah, it has the like do-it-yourself thing of the Blender community, uh, but it also like aims at AAA workflows, which is very promising. Again, right? Like it means that like we are not as dependent on how do we say it? Like on like what resources will be available to make something work, because you know, if there is request demand for that, they are more very likely to do that here in InstaMAT. Anyway, I should probably keep going. We still have a lot to cover. I don't want to do a third stream, sorry, that would be too much for me. So yes, as you can see, I had a bit of fun here, super fancy custom noise tomfoolery. I created my custom grunge, blending a lot of different noises and like individual sprites. So what you can do, right? You can take a shape. In my case, multiple shapes. I even use this like Vesica shape, which like I have no idea what you would use it for. Mm, they plan to release some stylized stuff, so maybe that will entice new members to the community. Perhaps, perhaps. I don't really know anything about stylized stuff. I've always been into more like PBR workflows, but yeah, uh, you know, we don't have any like Kivahara filters or anything as far as I can tell. But I think Substance Designer only added those last year, or maybe this year even. So we are not that far behind if we are just InstaMAT. Also, let's not forget InstaMAT is for free, which is crazy. Yeah. Anyhow, yes. So you can create individual sprites like this. What you do then is you blur them heavily. Yeah, that's very important. You have to deform them as much as you can, right? Like let's stay sane, but deform them. I just had a lot of fun. Like there is no system to the madness here. I just like created some noises and just like went nuts, you know? Oh, they are adding Kivahara too. Excellent. Um, then you like tighten it up. You create a histogram select to get rid of the excess noise, right? Like we have little splotches. I don't know how much you can see it on the stream, but there are little like dots left over. So I clean that up with histogram select. Then I blurred it some more. This time to add like a really subtle detail, and then I created a mask. It's this very jagged element, right? And what I do then, I create a really intense, really high value. Like you can go above whatever there is if you just type it in. Originally I had like 500. It was too much, and I get this pattern, which looks like I don't know what it looks like leaves. It was not what I wanted, right? It actually looked really good as some sort of stone texture when I high passed it, when I used high pass to process it. But I kept it because you know that was a test. It was a challenge again. Like I wanted to try many different things for the material. So I ended up doing all sorts of like weird things. For example, here I'm using difference at 80% for some reason on a blurred image. Uh, don't ask me why. I was just pressing button at this point. Uh, and like blending it again, and I get something like this, which to me looks like very noisy microscopic image of bacteria. Kill me now. Uh, yeah, and then I introduce some grain for good measure, which I don't end up using. like it was just too the height map and all that was just too noisy. At this point, I was just completely like freestyling it. Yeah, I didn't have any reference here. I didn't have any workflow set for me. I just wanted to create some sort of pattern. And what I was actually going for was the crushed ice, right? This. And I just couldn't get the pattern right. It either looked like cement, it either looked like concrete, it looked like just your general noise, right? It was too rough. The normal went crazy, the curvature went crazy. I just ended up not using it. Instead, I think it was a good decision. I ended up like having the sort of a water or like a blend of water and ice. And like it's not what I wanted to do, but it works. So this whole craziness here is actually quite useless. um, so I'm just gonna go through it very quickly because I'm just mixing together noises, right? Like you can always do that yourself. Just pull the values in one direction or another. There are like oh my god, endless permutations. Uh, yeah, do what you need to do. Then I added, and this was actually quite a game changer for the texture in the water. I created like these little shapes, right? Like they look a bit too oblique, right? Like a little too rounded. It's not what I wanted, but like it works sort of. Again, I had a fever when I was creating this, so I didn't really care too much about the actual result. I just wanted to finish, and so I tried to add more of a like jaggedness by using this node, which that was the first time I even noticed that it's there. It's this fractal warp. It creates grunges. It starts looking as the liquid noise, if you remember. It's one of my favorite noises in InstaMAT. It's this liquid noise. It's almost the same, right? Like it's some sort of fractal warp Berlin, evidently. Yeah. So yeah, I use that, and it adds like little, I don't know how to show it to you here. Like it adds these like black parts, and in the image, it covers this, right? It covers this weird albedo difference. So I ended up using it. I could have just gone with some clouds or some I don't know, blur. I ended up using another noise and a fractal warp operation. It's an interesting one. I am not exactly sure what I would do with it. Maybe maybe there's some use I'm missing. Might be interesting to create like moss, for example. Um, don't know. Anyway, yeah, and this is actually quite important. I'm using waves to create a bit of a well, waves in the water. I wanted a bit of like dynamic shape in there. I didn't want it to go like all over the place, but I wanted to raise the water in some places. And so, for example, here it's leaking. That's because the waves pattern is sort of like raising that up. Um, it added a lot to the texture, actually. I don't know if I can turn it off. It doesn't really show that much, but it's there, trust me. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. All right. Here I started working on the sort of fine detail of the ice, and there is a lot. I wanted to go like ice is very smooth, right? The frozen lake material in InstaMAT does have a lot of like normal information in it, but it doesn't really have any height information past that. I added some because I thought, it's like early spring, the ice is melting away. There are going to be a lot of imperfections on the surface. Let's say it's like sunny afternoon and it's melting away, right? So again, I started with a lot of noises. This time I tried a cellular, that's a horrible word to pronounce for a Czech person, fractal sum. I used this dense noise, which is obviously almost like a fine grain noise, Berlin, and fractal, and I did a lot of magic with it to create. I also used spots to create like larger and damaged areas, etc., etc. Again, like it's the same technique over again. Use histograms, select, use slope blurs, directional warps to customize your noises, and the result is, along with this one, I'm going to go back to this in a minute. The result is something like that. Yeah, all of these all of these noises combine into a very fine um, noise map, essentially. There isn't much to say about this, right? Like you have to, like procedural material creation is about choosing the right noise, deforming it a little bit, or deforming a shape with the right noise, and like sort of layering these operations over each other until you get something that looks realistic, or at least like overwhelms the eye so that it doesn't notice all the CGI-ness that's going on. uh, and yeah, there's not much to say. Now, there is one thing I wanted to talk about, and it's this technique that's a bit unpredictable, but also gives very nice results. So I started with this liquid noise, and it has these like clusters that I really liked, and they have this fractal pattern around them, or like almost it's also a bit like layered, like quantized. And I wanted to preserve these outlines to create like melting shapes. I don't know if I can find what it does here. Yeah, for example, here I don't know if you can see these like little lines. I wanted a subtle normal effect there, and maybe a place where the snow could sort of get caught in. And the way I did that, I slow blurred it so it created more of a bubbly shape again. I did that again, and you can see it. Right now, it's starting to look like frozen water. Right? I completely overblown the slow blur. You can see I have it at 700%. It's artifacts. It's essentially artifacts, but it's artifacts that look like frozen water. I think this, if it was a bit less noisy, could actually look like ice itself. So to repeat, basically you take liquid noise. Maybe you could use like a much larger scale, let's say 2 tiling. Yeah, you slow blur it, and then you slow blur it like crazy. With the mode was set to maximum in this case, right? And then what I did, I created a high pass. High pass, as you know, it sort of removes um, the big shapes from the image. In this case, there were just these like white shapes and black shapes, and I just got rid of them. Then when you auto levels that, it looks almost like some, um, it could be a map for your what's it called? Coral reefs, right? It looks like water that's been like trying to get around some stones in the water, uh, in the sea, in the ocean. So I found that like very interesting, and I wanted to keep that. The issue is any high pass node you are going to use is largely dependent on the resolution of the input. So when you go into 4K, it started creating like more Moira patterns, right? More Moira, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like essentially your um, your Doppler effect patterns, and yeah. So at 4K the material didn't look as good as at 2K. Uh, I know there are some things you can do to sort of lock the execution size of your material, but I discovered it when I was rendering it for a preview, and I didn't go back to fix it. So anytime you use high pass, anytime you use a very high frequency noise that goes directly into your image, anytime you use, for example, edge detect or fluff fill, you have to think about the resolution and how it's going to change. For example, if I had like small shapes, like for example in the marble material we had small shapes, and I changed the resolution, the marbling pattern will be very different. So it's always good to check your work while you're doing that. That's one of the mistakes I made. It's a good lesson. I knew, like, in my head I knew that this can happen, but I didn't expect it to be so pronounced, right? Also, what I'm doing, I wanted a bit of directionality to the image, so I ended up doing this. It's as if there was a bit of wind and a bit of snow going across the image. It's very subtle, but it's there again. Um, yeah, it's mostly albedo information again, right? Like albedo and roughness. It's nothing else. All right. I also created a little more variation, like very fine grayscale noise, just to add more variations. I was just like, you know, using a lot of different noises to see how I could play with them. Okay, and now I blended these together. So this is the ice information with all the height information and all that. Uh, I create auto levels so that it's predictable again, right? I wanted the eyes to be the uppermost part of the material, and then I used height blend. Now height blend is usually a very easy node to control. Not in this case. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I had it set on this like on top, and then I played with these top offsets and bottom offsets and contrasts and all that. I just couldn't get it working, really. I don't know. I'm not going to move with it now because I'm happy where it is, with where it is. And I ended up controlling it with the histogram shifts. Histogram shift, that's what it says. uh, it will take your values and like move them more to the white or more to the black. So it was a much easier way to control where the water level is going to be. So I can actually change it. I'm just going to copy this value so that I don't mess it up, right? Like you can very easily just like flood your entire ice with this. Let's go lower. Now you can also see the sort of the wave effect taking place, because for example here there shouldn't be any water, but that's the height of the waves coming in. You can also see it here. It's not the most predictable thing I did. I would probably go about it in a different way next time. Okay. hmm And yes, so that's essentially it for the height. I have been talking now for 2.5 hours. Are there any questions, any suggestions, any, I don't know, last words before I die? I guess not. Um, yeah, I'm afraid I'm out of mental strength, out of voice, out of anything I can contribute. So I think I'm going to stop here. Um, I'm gonna try and stream the last part probably on Friday. Is there a map link? Yes, there is the not quite like the Blender one. It's called LIRP, right? Like linear interpolation, which is essentially the operation you get like in Blender. Um, you have to get into like how InstaMAT handles data. But for example, how do I show this to you? Mm, yeah, okay. Let's take Berlin and um, hmm, maybe not Berlin. Okay, how do I show this to you? Okay, shape generator. Grayscale. Yeah. So you can. Nothing works. Why not? I wanted to expand this. Where's that? My shortcuts don't work for some reason. I think this material is a bit overwhelming InstaMAT a little bit. Now, I want to expose, let's say, input parameter size, right? So I get a float value here, a float value of 0.5. Now, when I change this, it's normalized between 1 and 0.1, 0.01. Now, what if I want this basically linearly interpolated in a different way? Well, you can get lerp, or it's like linear, in, what is it called? Yeah, lerp float, and that's essentially your map range. Uh, which you can plug in, right? And here you specify the value is x, right? So in this case, it's the input, which that would be the input of the map range node, and here you specify the maximum and the minimum, right? And so now when I move this, it's being remapped to 0.8 and 0.2, right? You can see the values here. So that's how you would create something like basic map range in InstaMAT. Does it answer your question? Okay, and so Dragon Sleeve. The top offset and bottom offset of height blend is just histogram edit node wrapped into it. Yeah, I know. I just I just couldn't get a good result. I just couldn't get a good result. It turned out for my specific values and my specific needs and my stupid way of going about it, because it was supposed to be the crushed ice, not the water level, right? I kept clipping stuff. I couldn't get this damage to look good and all that. So in the end, I just ended up shifting the histograms left and right a little bit without the offsets. You know, like I said, it wasn't a good idea the way I did it. It would have been better to use just regular blend, I think. Yeah. Um, with like small differences in like where the water is and all that. It looks a bit weird. It really looks like there are like valleys of water. That's why I started calling them rivers, right? Uh, but yeah, but it wasn't great. Yeah, I'm using the intersection and the other masks heavily. You can see that this like actually I'm not using the intersection. I'm just using the mask here, but I'm using that to create all of my other maps down the line, right? It's great. That's why I wanted to use it. I didn't want to mess with masking my snow from the water after that. But yeah, um, it's not optimal, but it did the job, right? So RailJ says I usually use it for a more stylish edge where I've tested. You mean the LRP now? Yes, yes, of course. Yeah. There, I don't know if you've ever coded anything, uh, but you can you have these like data types, right? You have integers or what they call unit integers. I guess does it work? Int? Yeah. Um, all these functions, yeah, like you would get in Python or in any other like coding language that would use data types, right? Specific data types. You can transform them, right? Like you can get an integer that outputs a float somehow and all that, and you can do all sorts of mathematical stuff, just like you would in shader editor. It's similar to math node, but it's split into many different nodes because here you have to handle the type. Yeah. It's also like this is more like you would work in geometry nodes in Blender, right? Like you have to handle your vectors, you have to handle your floats, you have to handle your strings and all that. That's very similar. So if you're at least somewhat familiar with geometry nodes, you can easily or somewhat easily transition into, let's say, NPass creation in InstaMAT. Yes, yes, that opens a whole new world of possibilities. And there are people like what's his name, Angel on Discord, right? Like who can do like crazy stuff with it. I myself am not a coder. I tried, I failed. I'm not going to do it again. But at least like basic knowledge works for InstaMAT for procedure creation. All right. Any other questions or suggestions or complaints, really? Like, look at this mess, right? Um, I'm not even sure what I did there. I, yeah, it gave me some sort of color map, albedo map. I then handled a bit of the normals, and that was it. Some roughness, of course. But luckily, like roughness on this image is also quite complicated. Like this is where it gets really stylized. Like obviously you will want your eyes to be very reflective. The damaged parts, in reality, they would be very reflective as well, but they would be rough in terms of like scattering, right? Because you would have uh, like a lot of different shapes. So this is where CGI fails a little bit in shaders like this, right? Like you need to have like highly reflective material that's very rough at the same time. How do you do that in CG, right? Like you don't. Uh, and at the same time, my snow, I don't know how rough snow is in reality. Like it started snowing the other day here in Prague, and like I went outside and I tried to look at it, and again, like you have particles that are extremely bright, you have particles that are not bright at all, and overall it's very rough. It's almost like dust, but not quite, right? So I'm not quite sure how to do it, and I ended up creating a bit of a snowy effect on the edges, which is very stylized. It looks very stylized. Like in fact, it shouldn't be on the edges; it should be all over the place, right? But I felt like maybe this is like where it sort of the the snow sort of melted into the edges. I don't know. I have no justification for it. I thought it looked cool, and I gave it I think maybe zero point 0.4, zero point 0.3 roughness, and like it still reflects a lot of light, which is supposed to do. But if you like don't give it that much roughness, if you give it more roughness, that's what I'm trying to say, it will start to look like cement because it's basically white. Yeah, I'm not sure how to make good-looking ice that's just like patches of ice. Sorry, good-looking snow that's just patches of snow on ice because the difference in roughness is very obvious, which can be cool. That's what we want, right? Like we want specular information that's like very interesting to look at. But at the same time, if you're going for realism, you have to make some choices, and they are not really easy in this case. So that's why I sort of ended up going for this. Let's outline the edges with snow. Anyway, I guess I'll talk about the specifics maybe on Friday. I'm not promising anything. Had I not made that mistake, that stupid mistake today, I would have finished. But yeah, it is what it is. All right, I'm gonna read chat one last time. So it's really great. Yeah, I've read that. It is more similar to a mix between shader editor and Serpent's visual coding in Blender. I have never done any visual coding in Blender, or what do you mean exactly? But yes, it is essentially a huh, it is a shader editor like you would get, except you get no control over the renderer here. right? Like you get amazing control of the texture creation part. You get all these noises we've talked about and all that. Um, but here you can't control your race. You can't control your um, you know mixing of like different PBR channels and all that. So there is that. Okay, yeah, you were actually coding an add-on for Blender. Well, that's impressive. I can't do that. I'm impressed with people who can do that. So good job. No, I am like on a personal note. I studied philosophy. Ended up doing art because academic life wasn't for me. But uh, yeah, I'm an English teacher, an astronomer, a philosopher, a sociologist, now a 3D artist a little bit, actually quite a bit, but I'm definitely no coder, and I don't think I'll ever be able to code. I tried it a couple of times, and it's just not working for me. Serpents is an add-on which help you create add-ons for the known system to help you make it faster. Okay, so it's like I see. I've seen some experiments in that will like yes speed up add-on building. Yeah. Not impressive. Anyhow, guys, I'm really tired. Thanks for hanging out. You guys are awesome. Hopefully there is at least something in my rambling that you found interesting. Um, Again, I would take this material as something you shouldn't do, or at least not in a manner I did it in. But the principles behind it are sound, I think. Yeah, you start with cracks, you mix it with a lot of noises, you prepare your albedo maps, and then you derive your roughness maps and normal maps, just like in any other material. I tried many different noises. I tried creating my own noises. I created some interesting, you know, adjustments to my noises. By the way, I forgot to mention that when you use the high pass, the blending mode that you want to use is usually soft light. Actually, it creates amazing results. That's a trick I learned in an architectural visualization studio. They use it in Photoshop to sort of enhance their images. They use like high level, high pass, high threshold, high pass, and then they blend it in with soft light. It just increases contrast. Yeah, surprisingly, it increases contrast. But like you can target it a little bit with the high pass. Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Oh yeah, I came from coding, but yeah, so like so for you it's more about like knowing what the note is called, not exactly what to do with it, right? I wish I had it like that. For me, it's the other way. I really like have to think about what I'm doing. Like sorry, that came out wrong. Anyway, I'm going to sign out now. Have a nice evening. I might be back on Friday. If not, I might be back sometime next week before Christmas. I'm a little busy right now. Uh, but yeah, uh, let the posterity have this stream that started twice. So, see you all. Bye bye.